The coolness is the first thing you register, a soft seep of damp stone against your skin. You are still deeply nestled in the linen sheets, wrapped in the quiet cocoon that only early morning allows. It is not yet day, merely the hushed threshold where deep indigo bleeds into the faintest gray. The heavy weight of the mattress feels reassuringly solid beneath you, a barrier between your inner world and the burgeoning reality just beyond the thin wooden window frames. You do not stir immediately, allowing yourself to drift in the subtle ebb and flow of half-sleep, letting the silence gather around you like fine dust. The sounds are whispers, things that belong only to these moments before the town fully awakens. A distant clatter, perhaps a bucket hitting stone further down the alleyway, the rhythmic shuffle of straw sandals on packed earth. There is the faint, low murmur carried on the damp air, voices too quiet to make out words, merely patterns of breathing and soft conversation from neighbors already rising in their own rooms. You notice how these sounds do not intrude, but rather settle over you, a natural layer of sound that tells you life continues, softly, quietly. Slowly, carefully, you allow your limbs to uncurl. The sheets are cool where they meet your bare skin, reminding you gently of the night's chill. You sit up, and the movement causes a slight pull across your back, an acknowledgement of gravity's gentle insistence. Looking out through the window gap, you see only a muffled wash of gray, struggling to overcome the deep shadows pooled in the narrow street below. There is no sudden burst of light, just this gradual lightening, patient and inevitable. The scent of the air changes as you finally rise. It carries an admixture unique to awakening stone and cool earth. The sharp tang of residual dampness mixed with something sweet and woodsy, perhaps from banked fires still cooling in neighboring hearths. You draw a breath deep into your lungs, feeling the cold, clean intake fill your chest. The air seems different this early. It feels untainted by the day's movement, pure potential. You slip off the bed, your bare feet meeting the cool stone floor. The chill is immediate and distinct against the soles of your feet. You pause, letting the sensation register up through your ankles, a physical grounding that pulls you fully into the moment. This slow process of rising seems itself an act of historical observation, the simple body moving through ancient structures built to endure centuries of such quiet awakenings. There is no urgency to getting dressed. Instead, you walk across the room, drawn by the small basin in the corner, where a pitcher of water waits on a low shelf. You cup your hands and scoop up a little cool water, bringing it slowly to your lips. The temperature hits your mouth as a momentary shock, startlingly clean. It is the taste of deep night moisture, untouched by human heat or hustle. As you wash your face with the coolness, you watch the rivulets of water tracing down your chin, catching the faint gray light. You notice the texture of the stone basin beneath your hands, rough, worn smooth in places by countless decades of similar ritual washing. These small imperfections tell a silent story of communal living and necessary repetition. Every wash, every rinse, is an echo of those who have been here before you. You pull on a simple linen garment laid out nearby, the fabric cool and slightly stiff against your skin. The weight of it feels minimal, yet substantial enough to provide structure. Dressing itself becomes a slow, meditative process. You do not hurry the tying of the sash or the pulling of the sleeves over your arms. Instead, you focus on the simple mechanics. The nodding fingers find purchase. The linen slides smoothly against skin that has grown accustomed to various layers of clothing through seasons and lives. It is an act of preparation, yes, but also a gentle acknowledgement of the routine that anchors existence. Taking another few moments of stillness, you return to the small window overlooking the street. The rooftops are still largely obscured by shadow, making the narrow alley below feel secret and enclosed. You observe the way the shadows meet the edges of the stone buildings, creating deep, charcoal bands punctuated only by the faint reflections of unseen grates or laundry lines. The whole town is held in a collective breath, waiting for the signal that will start it. You hear something then, not loud, but insistent enough to break the quiet spell. It is the distinct, slightly uneven crowing of a rooster, far off perhaps, yet carrying across the cool morning air like a single silver note. This sound marks the shift, the subtle turning point from deep rest to waking life. The pre-dawn stillness begins its slow withdrawal. You can now detect more definite sounds, the gentle thump and scrape of wooden wheels on stone that signal the passage of early carts, the quick, high calling of children being let out for a morning play, the soft creak of heavy wooden shutters opening to let in what little available light exists. Everything seems quieter now, paradoxically, than it will be at noon. The activity is measured, weighted by the cool air and the necessity of rising with the sun's slow authority. You feel a quiet anticipation growing within you, not of grand events, but simply of participating in the steady, reliable flow of daily life. This gentle unfolding is itself a form of history, moment by deliberate moment. You turn from the window, preparing your feet for the journey down the steps and out onto the cobblestone path, ready to meet the rhythm of the waking town. You slip out of the relative quiet of your room and find yourself on the cobblestones. The early morning air is cool, carrying the mingled scent of damp stone and last night's cooking smoke. It feels like a breath drawn deep into an old body, a slow exhalation of the night. You walk slowly at first, letting your bare feet register every uneven rise and dip of the ancient street beneath you. The stones are gray with moisture, cool against your soles, telling silent stories of countless footsteps that have preceded yours. A gentle chill settles on your exposed skin, a coolness that is not sharp or alarming, but rather constant, like the pervasive presence of the old city itself. You notice how the light behaves here in the early hours. It is not yet bright enough to burn away shadows entirely, but it has passed the deep velvet blackness of true night. Instead, everything is bathed in a muted, silvery wash that seems to diffuse and soften the edges of the buildings. The stone walls absorb this faint light, giving them depth and texture, emphasizing every curve and imperfection built into their massive foundations. You observe the pattern of moss growing near the gutters, the small patches of resilient green claiming purchase on the dark rockwork. It is a delicate battle between nature's slow growth and human permanence. As you begin to move with more purpose, your steps drawing you toward the heart of the village, the unique aroma of the awakening town becomes clearer. There is the sharp, sweet tang of wood smoke rising from unseen hearths, mingling subtly with the earthy smell of wet soil that hasn't yet dried under the sun. Beneath these notes, a warmer scent emerges, the comforting promise of baking bread. This simple combination tells you everything about the rhythm of life here, a dependence on basic resources and cycles. Your path eventually guides you toward a central thoroughfare where several domestic routines are already unfolding. You pass other people moving with that characteristic morning slowness, their steps measured and unhurried. They carry woven baskets or empty earthenware jugs, their movements imbued with the quiet efficiency of those who know this route by heart. Their clothes appear rough-spun and practical, designed for durability rather than display, a testament to the life lived close to the ground. The air seems to vibrate slightly with repetitive, low sounds. The rhythmic scrape of wooden wheels on stone, the occasional distant clanging from an unseen workshop, and the soft murmur of voices exchanging necessary goodbyes. These are not the dramatic sounds of an event, but the continuous hum of community functioning at its simplest level. One significant stop comes naturally to your attention: a communal water trough near what seems to be the main gathering point. Several women are already gathered here, bending low to fill heavy, porous jugs. The sound of the drawn buckets striking the stone edge is steady and hypnotic. You watch their hands in action. They move with an almost practiced grace, knowing exactly how much effort a heavy load requires, yet performing the task without strain or complaint. You pause near the trough, drawn into the quiet spectacle of utility. The water itself looks incredibly clear, reflecting the pale, muted sky and making it seem almost luminous. You observe the texture of the stones holding the basin. They are worn smooth by centuries of hands touching them, a physical record of continuous use. Taking your turn, you dip your own vessel into the cold flow. The temperature hits you immediately, a shock that is brief but invigorating, pulling the focus entirely onto the immediate sensory input: the chill running down your wrist, the sharp scent of mineral water. As you lift the heavy jug, its weight settling reassuringly in your arms, you feel a deep kinship with these other women. It is a shared necessity that connects strangers across generations and social strata, the fundamental act of drawing life itself into containers. The ritual is unremarkable to an outsider, yet here it feels profound, anchoring the community to its basic needs. You move on, following the flow of goods. Near the corner where the thoroughfare narrows, there are small, semi-permanent stalls. Goods are laid out simply: braids of dried herbs, perhaps woven baskets waiting for new uses, and stacks of raw materials like lengths of dyed wool or bundles of kindling wood. The vendors do not call out in a flamboyant manner. Instead, they sit quietly behind their goods, ready to exchange words only when addressed. The owner of the bread stall is slightly further along your path. You notice that his loaf does not simply rest on a wooden board. It seems almost stacked into an architectural form, its golden crust gleaming faintly against the darker wood. The aroma here is particularly strong now, yeast and roasted grains combined with heat. It's a rich, wholesome smell, suggesting care and immediate sustenance. You look down at the uneven cobblestones again as you walk past this stall. Each stone seems to have been placed by hand, imperfectly fitted, but forming an enduring pattern underfoot. The difficulty of moving through such a surface forces you to slow your pace naturally, turning the simple act of walking into an exercise in mindfulness. While observing the bread, you see a small child playing nearby with a piece of fallen wood. The adult supervising the child does not seem to be doing anything specific, merely existing in a state of quiet observation. This moment of parental presence, the watchful, relaxed vigilance, feels deeply ingrained in the tapestry of life here. The early errands are punctuated by these moments of subtle human choreography: the weight of filled jugs, the careful negotiation between stalls, the unspoken acknowledgement exchanged when passing another family group on the street. Each person is focused intently on their immediate, necessary task, yet collectively, they create a vast, intricate picture of peaceful industry. The scent of baking bread and damp earth begins to recede slightly as you continue deeper into the quarter. The air grows a little crisper, suggesting that the sun has finally begun its ascent beyond the roof lines, pushing back the last vestiges of cool morning mist. This change in temperature is subtle but noticeable, warming the skin just enough on your forearms and cheeks. You begin to notice details about the architecture that only appear when the light shifts. The colored tiles flashing near a doorway, the specific way shadow pools beneath a balcony railing, creating sharp contrasts of light and dark against pale plaster walls. These are not grand structural elements designed for display, but humble additions, functional and rooted deeply in the practical needs of daily life. You walk past small gardens nestled between the dwellings. They are neat little pockets of cultivation, suggesting that even within this dense collection of human habitations, there is a deep commitment to growing things. You observe hanging baskets with crimson petunias struggling against the coolness of the early hour, and small patches of soil where tender greens sprout. These signs suggest not only sustenance, but also an intention toward beauty, however modest that effort may be. The process feels meditative, this slow unfolding into the day. It is a gradual accepting of the rhythm. Wakefulness leads to basic needs, which in turn dictates movement from one source of sustenance to another. There is no sudden rush, no alarm demanding speed, only the steady current of domestic preparation guiding your steps along the ancient, enduring streets. You follow the gentle, dusty path that leads you away from the bustle of the main square. The movement is easy, unhurried, a natural meandering through the narrow passageways built for centuries ago to handle nothing but feet and slow-moving carts. You are drawn by an almost imperceptible scent, a blend of treated hide, fine wood dust, and the sharper, medicinal tang of plant roots. This path guides you into a secluded stretch of town that feels slightly set apart from the main flow of life. Here, the buildings press close together, their lower stories giving way to narrow windows high above, suggesting private lives lived shielded from public view. You find yourself standing at the edge of a small courtyard, and the source of the scent becomes clearer. It is a workshop. The rhythmic tap-thud sound draws your attention first. It is an insistent but measured beat, coming from within a doorway arching into shadow. You pause, letting the sound wash over you for a moment, cataloging its rhythm against the background silence of the late morning. The noise does not feel aggressive, but rather structured, the predictable work of skilled hands meeting raw material. Curiosity, gentle and quiet, guides your steps toward the open entrance. You enter the threshold and find yourself enveloped by a different kind of air. It is warmer here than outside, humid with latent warmth, and carrying the deep, organic aroma of labor. The predominant smell is undoubtedly tanned leather, mingled faintly with the dry, sweet scent of cedar sawdust. Sunlight filters down from overhead gaps in the workshop's roof structure, cutting bright rectangles onto the uneven, packed earth floor. These shafts of light illuminate fine particles suspended in the air, dust motes dancing slowly like tiny, forgotten spirits. It speaks of ceaseless industry, but an industry conducted with great deliberation. The man inside is bent over a long work bench, surrounded by half-finished pieces and organized tools. He works on what appears to be leather goods, perhaps book bindings or shoe soles. His movements are economical, precise. He does not move with sudden bursts of energy. Rather, each action follows directly from the last in a practice sequence that suggests years, perhaps decades, of refinement. You watch his hands first. They are rough and stained, the knuckles thickened by constant use, yet they operate with an astonishing finesse. This physical testament to repetition speaks volumes about the knowledge contained within them. You drift closer to the edge of the work area, not wanting to disturb the delicate concentration he maintains. You observe the materials laid out: bolts of richly dyed hide awaiting treatment, stacks of carefully planed wood scraps, and small vats containing various dyes: indigo, saffron yellow, deep earth brown. Everything here is organized with a functional logic that suggests respect for process. The accumulated tools on the bench tell stories of their uses. Awls bear tiny, rhythmic nicks in their tips. Knives show gentle signs of fraying along the edges, and specialized stitching needles rest in small wooden boxes. The artisan makes a minute adjustment to a piece of darkened leather, running his thumb over its grain. You notice how he angles the material so that the light catches the subtle texture, the way it shifts from matte black to a muted sheen. It is not merely an object. It is a medium awaiting transformation, guided by human intention and inherited skill. Slowly, you pick up your mind's attention, letting the external world fall away. You begin to wonder about the passage of time within this controlled environment. Outside, the sounds of the town are muted, a distant call to prayer, the occasional braying donkey. But here, only the work defines the temporal rhythm. The steady shh of a specialized knife against wood or bone acts as an internal clock, measuring out minutes by its consistency. It is clear that this trade requires more than mere physical strength. It demands patience that borders on meditation. Every cut, every burnish, every careful stitch must be considered. The knowledge embodied here is not written down in a great book for everyone to peruse. It resides instead within the musculature of the hands and the steady judgment of the eye. As he pauses, lifting his gaze briefly from the work, you feel observed, though perhaps only as much by his peripheral awareness as you are. His look is not one of critique or expectation, but rather a quiet acknowledgement of an observer present. You offer him a slow, simple nod, a gesture that says merely, "I watch, and I respect this labor." The interaction does not change the pace. It only solidifies your quiet role as witness. He turns back to his task, picking up a piece of thin parchment-like leather and beginning the meticulous work of folding edges with intense concentration. You find yourself contemplating the nature of such specialized skill. How many hours must one spend simply mastering the perfect fold? What makes this knowledge so difficult to teach quickly, or even poorly to forget? You realize that beneath the surface layer of professional calm, there is a deep connection between the man and his material. He treats the leather not as an inert object, but as something with its own inherent texture and resistance. You observe how he handles scraps. Nothing is wasted. Every offcut, every piece deemed too small for main work, seems destined for another purpose. A bookmark, a label, something modest yet useful. This careful consideration of waste echoes the mindful living you had glimpsed earlier that morning, when you watched others use simple provisions and water efficiently. There is an economy of spirit mirrored in the economy of his materials. In this workshop, every resource, visible or invisible, seems to be accounted for. You spend a long time simply watching the interplay of light and shadow across the curved surfaces of wood and polished bone tools. The dust motes continue their slow ballet, catching the sunlight and reminding you that even in industry, stillness persists. You are learning not just about leatherwork, but about methods. The quiet confidence in one's accumulated knowledge, the beauty found in necessity, and the deep rhythm required to live a measured life. Eventually, without any sudden decision or signal, you begin your slow withdrawal. The time spent here feels like an absorption, not of information, but of atmosphere. You carry with you the scent memory of tanned hide and sawdust, and the lingering resonance of that precise tap-thud beat in your inner ear. Leaving the workshop feels less like departing a place, and more like resurfacing after having been submerged in deep, methodical quietude. The narrow passage seems slightly dimmer now that you have left the protected niche of the shop. You walk slowly back towards the main thoroughfare, but nothing about the town looks quite the same. The casual chatter of passers-by now sounds structured, almost echoing the measured rhythm of the artisan's work. You notice details you missed earlier. The peeling paint on a window frame here, the faded color of a curtain there, the specific pattern of moss growing in the deep mortar joints between two stones. The quiet study of this craft settles into your thoughts, a profound and satisfying lesson on endurance. This enduring skill, passed down through apprenticeship and practiced over generations, connects you quietly to countless lives that lived within the same stone walls centuries ago. It is a gentle reminder that life's greatest rhythms are often found not in grand events, but in the continuous, humble performance of skilled daily work. The midday sun settles upon the central square, softening the harsh edges of the ancient paving stones. You walk slowly now, allowing your eyes to adjust to the light that seems richer and heavier than it was this morning. The pace here is unlike the hushed rhythm of the side streets you navigated earlier. It is a more diffusive energy, a low-frequency hum of existence. You feel the warmth beginning to settle in your shoulders, a gentle physical reminder of the day's progress. As you move deeper into the square, the architecture itself seems to participate in the passing time. The stone walls absorbing and radiating heat, telling silent tales of centuries that have waxed and waned around this very spot. You notice how differently people inhabit this space. Some are merely passing through, utilizing the thoroughfare as a means to another destination, while others seem settled into the rhythm of being right here, rooted in the afternoon's quiet hum. Your gaze drifts over groups gathered near the fountain's edge, where droplets perpetually splash and vanish, mimicking the ceaseless passage of minutes. You observe the small interactions unfolding at the edges of your path. A merchant sits upon a low wooden stool, his stall draped with lengths of dyed wool, deep blues mixed with earthen reds, colors that seem to have been plucked from local soil itself. He is not loudly calling out prices. Rather, he waits in a patient stillness, offering only glimpses of goods, and occasionally nodding to passers-by who meet his eye. You find yourself contemplating the nature of waiting, both for a transaction to occur and simply for life to happen. It requires an almost meditative stillness, that patience, much like the careful crafting you observed earlier. A small knot of people gathers near a stone bench carved with faded reliefs, perhaps commemorating some forgotten local figure or event. They are not engaged in loud conversation. Rather, they stand close enough that their murmured words barely travel beyond them, caught and muffled by the dense air. You can detect the subtle scent notes carried on the breeze, a mixture of sun-baked dust, faint animal musk, and something sweetly herbal, perhaps wild thyme growing in cracks in the paving stones. This blend of smells gives the square its singular, undeniable character. As you drift past a baker's discarded wooden cart, still bearing the residue of flour dust, you notice the subtle sheen on the oiled wood, a testament to countless hands having rested upon it over many years. You think about the resilience built into simple objects like this, things that undergo constant use, yet endure through lack of grand design or impressive metallurgy. The flow of humanity is gentle, an organic counterpoint to the permanence of the stone. Children dart across your path with unrestrained bursts of energy, laughing at things you cannot hear, their small movements bright streaks against the muted backdrop of routine life. Their presence forces a momentary shift in focus, reminding you that even this ancient setting accommodates fleeting joy. You slow your pace near a couple who are examining some bundled greens, possibly root vegetables or bitter herbs for cooking later. The man points out a specific imperfection on one leaf, and the woman responds with a quiet gesture of assent. It is not an event. It is simply the continuation of necessary life, the commerce that underpins the day's sustenance. You realize how deeply intertwined every minor transaction is with the fabric of local existence. The acquisition of a single bunch of greens requires negotiation, knowledge of seasonality, and time. Turning slowly away from the immediate cluster of goods, your attention falls upon the texture of the stone pavement itself. The flagstones are uneven, polished smooth in some areas by generations of foot traffic, yet sharply chipped or worn down in others where water has found its way into the cracks. Running your hand across a segment of wall near your elbow, you feel the cool grit under your fingertips and note the slight irregularity of the mortar beneath. This physical sensation, the contrast between smooth wear and rough decay, becomes a quiet focal point for reflection. It is everywhere in this square. The polished corner of a merchant's stall next to the crumbling facade of an older building, the bright flush of new life on some herbs contrasted with the dried brown leaves clinging stubbornly to others. The midday air carries an almost tangible weight, not unpleasant, but dense with accumulated sounds and subtle smells. The occasional clatter from a distant kitchen door punctuates the low murmur of conversation. You perceive the rhythm of breathing around you, the collective intake and release of breath that accompanies a day spent in this open, communal space. You pause near a shaded recess formed by two sturdy pillars supporting an overhead archway. Here, beneath the slight canopy of shade, you feel a momentary drop in temperature, a brief respite from the sun's zenith heat. You observe how the light enters this semi-sheltered spot. It is fractured, dappled through gaps and slightly diffused, casting intricate patterns upon the dusty stone floor. It makes you consider the nature of observation itself. To simply watch without intent, to allow your senses to collect every minute detail. The shifting shadow, the faded pigment on a wall, the specific way sunlight catches the dust motes suspended in the columned air. This quiet attention becomes its own kind of labor, a gentle act of internal cataloging. The sense of community is not loud or performative here. It resides in the collective awareness of shared space and time. It is the acknowledgement that everyone present understands the rhythm of this square, the ebb and flow of people who live, work, buy, and sell from this spot year after year. You feel a deep, quiet kinship with these unnoticed rhythms, understanding them not through conversation, but through simple sensory immersion. You continue your slow circuit around the perimeter of the main gathering area. The sun continues its arc, altering the quality of light minute by minute, shifting everything from warm gold to brilliant white to a mellow afternoon amber. This subtle transformation dictates the mood, urging people to shift their activity, from the quick exchanges of midday sustenance toward more settled contemplation. As you walk, your feet occasionally adjust their placement on the stone, feeling the slight unevenness beneath your worn soles. Each step feels deliberate, anchored by the persistent sensory input. You notice a splash of vibrant color, a shawl draped over a railing, perhaps scarlet or deep saffron, that draws your eye and holds it for just a moment, a brief burst of vivid humanity against the aged stone palette. The square becomes less a place of commerce at this point, and more an open living room for the town. You absorb the details, the patina on the metal handles of the gates, the tiny weeds finding purchase in the narrow cracks where no large plant could survive, the way old bones of buildings seem to lean into each other for support. All these small imperfections contribute to a palpable sense of deep time and persistent habitation. The sounds now take precedence over sights. The faint thwack of an unseen loom beginning its day's work resonates from an adjoining alleyway. The rhythmic, dull ringing sound of a blacksmith working far off. The occasional burst of laughter that drifts from a nearby doorway. These disparate noises weave together into the rich, textured soundtrack of a functioning, breathing community. You simply exist within this tapestry of ambient noise, letting it wash over you and settle the day's hurried energy. The experience is not one of discovery, but rather of deep settling, of recognizing that life continues here, regardless of grand plans or external excitement. It rests in the simple, reliable cycle of human gathering beneath a shared patch of sun-warmed stone. The murmur of the central square has softened, settling into a steady background hum. You wander slightly away from the main thoroughfare, drawn by an entranceway flanked by weathered stone and creeping ivy. The air here changes subtly. The bustle of commerce gives way to a quieter reverence. Before you stands a small, unassuming structure, a local chapel or perhaps just a public area dedicated to remembrance. You slow your pace, letting the noise of the passing life fade into a generalized background rhythm. Taking in the surrounding details, you notice how the stone itself seems older here than the stones of the busy marketplace. It is a texture imbued with time, polished by countless hands and endured by centuries of weather. You might pass painted notices tacked to nearby walls, records of local festivals, announcements for religious holidays, or simple laws posted in fading script. The act of reading these signs requires settling your attention, a deliberate slowing down that pulls you out of the casual flow of observation. When you finally reach the entrance area, the sense is one of cool shadows and filtered light. You observe the architecture closely, the way the low roof lines hug the ground, suggesting humility rather than grandeur. The stones bear the marks not just of age, but of utility. Every corner seems designed to direct movement or hold a specific purpose for the community. As you stand near the chapel wall, the cool, damp air brushes past your ankles, carrying the faint, complex scent of old wax, dry herbs, and dust settled over decades. You notice small details. A planter filled with hardy flowering plants that seem determined to bloom despite their confined space. Perhaps a discarded length of faded ribbon or a smooth, worn piece of sea glass left by chance. These are all markers of human attention, gestures of remembrance or dedication. The local faith is not presented here as some dramatic spectacle, but as an integrated part of the daily fabric, woven into the very grain of the town's existence. It lives in these quiet corner ways, less in grand declarations and more in subtle arrangements of devotion. You consider the way people interact with this space. They do not usually stop here for drama. They might pause briefly on their way to another destination. A parent stopping to touch a small carving mounted near the entrance, or an elderly woman lingering to read a posting board before continuing her journey. This suggests that local belief and tradition are part of simply navigating the world, much like crossing a street or buying bread. They are practical elements of life. Your attention drifts upward, following the line of the roof tiles where they meet the sky. The simple craftsmanship of it speaks volumes about community effort and necessity. You realize that these structures, dedicated to faith or local memory, rely on continuous communal care, the washing away of grime from the weathered statues, the careful repainting of fading scripts, the tending of perennial flowers. It is a slow, collective burden and pride. As you walk slowly along the periphery, near a bench carved from heavy timber that has seen countless seasons of rain and sunshine, you observe the small signs of superstition woven into everyday life. Perhaps on one doorframe, someone has hung a specific knot or a piece of red cloth, a protective ward against bad luck, according to local whispers. These are not displayed for an outside observer. They are aimed at invisible forces, understood only by those who share the deep roots of this locality. It is part folklore, part serious belief. The air feels heavy with continuity. The weight of history seems palpable, pressing down gently on the shoulders like a cloak woven from time itself. You notice how the generations before you, the bakers, the weavers, the market stall keepers who walked these very stones, lived their lives within this gentle framework of routine and inherited belief. Your thoughts turn to the nature of knowledge here. It is not housed in vast libraries. It is held in the passing movements, the muttered concerns overheard from passers-by, the specific patterns of wear on the local church steps, or the specialized language used when discussing planting seasons. This knowledge is practical and deeply localized. To understand the rhythms of this town, you must learn to listen to these whispers. The warning tone of an older resident, the particular way a merchant prices a root vegetable based on the day's dewfall, the solemn cadence of the prayer offered at dusk. You continue your slow circuit. Near a corner fountain, where water bubbles up from the earth into a shallow basin lined with mottled stone, you pause again. The sound is soft, rhythmic, a quiet patter against ancient rock. You observe people using this source not just for drinking, but perhaps for washing hands before entering a place of worship or exchanging small coins for a blessing. It is an act that combines the practical necessity of water with the deep resonance of ritual. The passage of faith here feels entirely natural and interwoven with the material aspects of life. The smell of clean stone after a light sprinkle, the feel of worn wood under your fingertips, the cyclical pattern of the sun across the cobbled ground. It is not a sudden revelation or an exciting pilgrimage. It is a quiet immersion in the accepted way of things. You realize that these traditions serve a function beyond mere belief. They provide structure. They give meaning to the otherwise unpredictable flow of life, a reason to rise before dawn, a marker for when to plant, and a rhythm for how long to wait through the inevitable dry spells or rainy seasons. The sense of quiet contemplation settles over you. You are learning that resilience in this place comes not from dramatic acts, but from gentle adherence to inherited patterns both spiritual and practical. As you finally turn away from the chapel corner, heading back toward the main flow of foot traffic, you carry with you a heightened sensitivity. The world does not feel grand or mysterious. It feels profoundly settled, existing according to deeply understood cycles. The lesson is one of accepting continuity, respecting the quiet power contained within routine and collective memory. The quiet energy of the morning has settled into a gentle, midday lull. You find yourself at a simple wooden table, or perhaps an upturned crate that serves as a makeshift surface, surrounded by others who have gathered for this break in the day's work. The air here feels different from the cool dampness of dawn. It is warm, carrying the accumulated sense of industry and cooking fires, a blend of wood smoke, drying herbs, and dust warmed by the sun. Before you are a collection of provisions, rough-hewn loaves of bread, a creamy wedge of cheese, and perhaps some clusters of deep purple grapes resting on woven mats. There is no elaborate spread, nothing to suggest luxury, yet everything here speaks of solid sustenance and shared humanity. The first thing you notice is the texture beneath your fingers, the crust of the bread. It is thick, a little uneven, scored by the baker's rustic knife. You lift it carefully. It feels heavy with simple grain, holding within it the knowledge of local wheat fields and slow fermentation. Nearby, another hand breaks off a piece of cheese. The oiliness of it catches the sunlight, glowing softly against the dark wood. You consider how this single loaf represents an entire cycle, the planting in spring, the care through summer, the grinding at the mill wheel, and finally, the heat of the oven. You break away a corner of your bread. It tears with a satisfying, low rip. You bring it close, inhaling deeply. The scent is yeasty and faintly sweet, mixed with the sharper tang of sourdough starter. Taking a small bite, you focus purely on the experience. The crumbs flake easily against your tongue, dissolving into the deep, comforting flavor of simple carbohydrate. It is not the complex layering of modern baked goods. It is pure, honest grain, filling out a hollowed hunger in a satisfying manner. Next, you reach for the cheese. It has been kept cool in earthenware pots, and that coolness seems to have seeped into its dense structure. The taste is sharp, almost salty at first, followed by a milky richness that coats your mouth slowly. You chew deliberately, mapping the flavor changes, the interplay of ripeness and salt. Around you, the murmuring continues, punctuated by the occasional clink of pottery or the gentle scrape of a knife on wood. These sounds are merely background texture to the deep rhythm of eating. You pick at some grapes. They burst with juice that stains your fingers and lips, a brief moment of cool sweetness against the warmth of the meal. This small fruit offers a stark, bright counterpoint to the weighty starchiness of the bread and cheese. You notice how local foods dictate this pace of life. They require attention, slow handling, and appreciation for their innate qualities. Nothing is wasted, nothing is hurried. The conversation around you drifts easily, weaving through day-to-day accounts, the yield of a recent harvest, a complaint about the stubborn river mud, or a shared memory of the previous autumn's rain. You listen to the patterns in their speech, the familiar cadence, the way stories are recounted with careful emphasis on certain words, as if these simple gatherings themselves were keeping alive the community's history. These exchanges are not dramatic tales. They are miniature biographies of routine life. After finishing the provisions, you do not immediately rise. You sit for a few moments longer, allowing the lingering taste of salt and grain to settle on your palate. Your hands feel slightly sticky from the grapes and faintly dusty from the worn wooden surface. This period of stillness is itself part of the ritual. It is the necessary pause between labor and the next phase of activity. You observe the people around you again, now in a different light. The deep creases etched into their hands tell stories you can only guess at, the story of lifting heavy buckets, or perhaps turning soil from hand to hand over decades. There is a quiet dignity in their weariness, an acknowledgement that physical effort dictates the rhythm of existence here. You notice how even the simple act of sitting requires a certain posture, a settled ease born of habit and belonging. Sometimes your gaze drifts upward, to the eaves of the surrounding buildings. The tiles are weathered shades of terracotta and gray slate. They seem to absorb the bright overhead sun without reflecting it, holding onto the day's heat like slumbering beasts. You consider the hands that placed those tiles centuries ago, knowing that their labor has contributed to this quiet, ongoing shelter. It is a gentle reminder that survival here was built not by sudden acts of heroism or grand architectural gestures, but by countless small, repeated motions, kneading dough, hauling water skins, carefully sharpening an edge. It speaks to the fundamental strength found in continuity. This simple meal reinforces that notion. It is enough sustenance, perfectly calibrated to the local climate and seasonal yield. It sustains without extravagance. As the crowd slowly begins to disperse, signaled by stomachs demanding a slight movement or by tasks calling them away, the woodcutter leaving for a deeper forest, the basket carrier heading toward the outskirts, you begin your own slow process of departure. You gather any forgotten scraps or empty containers, joining in the collective tidiness. The remnants of the meal become part of the day's cycle. Discarded husks, polished stones, and used wooden trays are merely transitioned from one use to another. The air remains warm now, holding the faint, ghost-like scent of cooked sustenance blended with sharper midday smells. The musk of livestock passing by on cobbled paths, mixed with the lingering sweetness of wood smoke. This sensory overlap is the hallmark of life lived closely together in close quarters, where every function and every material eventually contributes to a shared ambient scent. You walk slowly away from the gathering spot, feeling the weight of the sun's warmth not as heat, but as a palpable blanket upon your shoulders. The memory of the cheese, that blend of salt and creamy fat, and the simple burst of grapes remains anchored in your awareness. It is more than just nourishment. It is an understanding of local plenty, a tangible connection to the soil and the daily rhythm that governs life here. The enduring lesson seems to be that profound contentment can arise from such humble foundations, requiring only patience and acute attention to the quality of the simple things. The warmth of the midday sun, which had warmed your skin during the square's bustle, begins to shift and mellow. It does not drop abruptly. Rather, it softens, like old linen left out on a rack too long. You feel this change in the air before you see it fully, a gentler insistence of heat, carrying less urgency than the noon sun did. Your footsteps naturally guide you away from the packed stones of the main thoroughfare, following a path that curves gently down toward the sound of running water. This movement feels less like an escape and more like a natural gravitational pull, drawing you outward to the boundary of the town. Along this way, you notice the change in the ground beneath your feet, transitioning from carefully laid, worn flagstones to something looser, perhaps compacted earth mixed with gravel and river silt. The transition is subtle, marking a gradual retreat from the organized life of humanity into the more yielding realm of nature's edge. The air here feels different, too. It carries a cooling element, a refreshing dampness that mixes with the residual smells of wood smoke and sun-baked dust. You inhale deeply, noticing how the scent profile changes. The sharpness of baking bread gives way to the deeper, mineral smell of wet stone and moving current. As you walk closer to the water's edge, this aquatic perfume grows stronger, mingled sometimes with the faint, vegetal aroma of river reeds or fallen leaves that have just begun to soften in the damp air. You pause at a point where an old stone retaining wall meets the bank, a structure clearly put up long ago to manage the flow of the current and hold back the muddy incline behind it. The gray tones of the worked stone are mottled by time. Patches of deep green moss cling stubbornly to the joints, thriving in the constant dampness that seems to radiate from the river itself. You run a hand over the rough surface of the wall, feeling the coolness seep into your fingertips, a tangible connection to the long passage of years. The sound of the water becomes more prominent now. It is not a violent roar, but a steady, pervasive murmur, a tireless voice speaking of continuity. You observe how it moves, in small eddies and gentle currents that never truly rest. The pace seems undisturbed by human measure or concern. It simply is. This ceaseless movement acts as a kind of natural chronometer for the afternoon. Further down, you notice clusters of people resting near the water's edge, some simply sitting on low benches carved from solid wood that shows signs of much earlier weathering. They are not gathered in formal groups, but rather scattered individuals or small families who seem to be absorbing the sound and rhythm of the river into their own breathing. You continue your stroll alongside this retaining wall, paying attention to details that might otherwise be missed if you simply walked past them. Look down at the exposed riverbed at low tide, or perhaps just in a section where the current has momentarily dipped. You see pebbles, smoothed by the constant abrasion of water and time. They are not sharp or angular. They are rounded into perfect, soft ovals of various colors: deep ochre, muted slate gray, pale jade green. Picking up one of these stones, its weight surprisingly solid in your palm, you turn it over. The smoothness is a tactile reminder of immense effort, the power of the current working patiently for centuries to reduce jagged rock into such quiet perfection. You feel the cool grit and subtle mineral residue left on your skin. The water's edge itself holds evidence of local life, objects carelessly discarded or placed with intent. Here and there, you spot smooth sticks twisted by water, perhaps intended as playthings for children who have moved further upriver, or small bundles of freshly gathered herbs tied together with twine. These little remnants are profoundly grounding. They weave the complex patterns of daily human existence back into your quiet contemplation of natural forces. The people living here understand how to read this place. The bank gives way to the water, and life simply accommodates the meeting point. As you walk further along the curving path, noticing the shifting shades of light that slant across the opposite bank, a deep turquoise where the current is fastest, and a shallower, greener hue near the reeds, you begin to feel the profound effect of this natural setting on your mind. The earlier bustle of people in the central square, the necessary transactions and exchanges, seems distant now. Here, the rhythm slows down naturally. Your breath deepens unconsciously, matching the gentle ebb and flow of the visible waterline. You think about how much time can be spent simply being without needing to do. The act of observation becomes its own purpose. You notice a patch of wildflowers blooming near an old-growth tree that leans slightly over the path. They are small, perhaps blue or purple, their petals delicate against the dark, rugged texture of the tree's bark. The life force visible in these tiny blooms seems to mirror the steady resilience of the river itself. A continuous renewal, a gentle pushing forward despite the constraints of surrounding stone and earth. You linger near them, considering this small point of fragile beauty, contrasted against the massive scale of the enduring stone architecture and the powerful flow of the water. The afternoon light continues its slow decline, casting long shadows that stretch across the uneven path. These lengthening shadows are a visible map of time passing, making the passage more palpable than any clock face could ever convey. You find yourself walking with a different kind of attention. You are watching how the gold tones of the sunset begin to tint the exposed surface of the stones and the water itself, creating a brief, mutable painting that shifts with every slight current change. This sense of deep time, the river's unending course against the stone's slow erosion, mirrored by the human cycle from daybreak to evening reflection, settles gently over you. You turn slightly, having walked along the main curve of the bank, and now find yourself facing back toward the town center, but remaining near the water's influence. The activity level has dropped considerably. Only a few people are still visible, perhaps sitting on their thresholds or gathering goods nearby. You gather your thoughts from this quiet communion with the river. This place offers an education not in history books, but in endurance. You reflect on the way human life, though structured by walls and routines, remains forever subject to the greater, slower patterns of nature. The inevitable flow, the constant cycle of light fading into shadow, followed by the necessary return of dawn. The long, gentle curve of the afternoon light begins to soften around you. The colors that seemed so sharp hours ago, the ochre dust on the walls, the vibrant green of the few small patches of growth near the water's edge, now deepen into tones of muted copper and dusty violet. You feel a subtle shift in the air itself, a lessening of the day's insistent warmth, replaced by a languid coolness that promises evening. The stroll has allowed your mind to wander away from the focused tasks of the day. It seems that the boundaries between walking and simply existing have blurred into one long stretch of meditative time. You notice the smooth, cool surface of the river stones under your fingertips as you trace them with a slow finger. They are shaped by countless cycles of water, each curve telling an ancient story of patient erosion. You consider how little effort was needed, only relentless, gentle flow to achieve such perfect smoothness. This silent force of nature seems to mirror some larger passage of time that governs the rhythm of this town itself. When you finally turn back from the bank and begin making your way through the quieter, residential lanes toward the edge of your lodging, the smells change again. The sharp, clean scent of river water gives way to a warmer mix, cured wood smoke mingling with the damp, earthy smell of cooking things, slowly baking roots or perhaps seasoned herbs. This is the scent of evening approaching, the communal preparation that marks the day's winding down. The journey is characterized by slow, deliberate movements. You pass doorways where heavy wooden shutters are being carefully drawn closed for the afternoon nap, and others where slivers of yellow light still spill out onto the flagstones, signaling ongoing life. These simple visual cues guide your understanding of the community's timing, a cycle dictated not by bells, but by the shifting quality of the sun. You reach a small, communal open area at the edge of the main settlement, where low-hanging beams and heavy wooden barrels suggest that preparation is taking place for the meal. Several people are already moving, their actions unhurried but purposeful. You observe hands reaching into baskets, bundles of green leaves, sturdy roots pulled from earth, and stalks of pale grain. Each item seems to have been selected with mindful intent, reflecting a deep knowledge of what the season offers. The task before you is not one requiring great strength or speed. It is more about measured cooperation. You find yourself near an area where several logs are being gathered, destined for the hearths that will soon hold warmth and light. The weight of them feels manageable, grounding. You kneel momentarily to pick up a few smaller pieces of dry kindling, noticing how the wood grain absorbs the last rays of sunlight, making it glow faintly amber. Lifting those small bundles of sticks feels like participating in a long, quiet chain of survival and simple comfort. It is a tangible acknowledgement that life continues through resourcefulness. The effort itself becomes meditative, demanding only attention to the texture and weight of the gathered material. You move next toward the preparation for food. Here, women are engaged in sorting vegetables laid out on thick cloths spread upon low tables. You watch one woman gently rinsing pale tubers under a steady stream from a wooden basin. The small bubbles rising from the water seem to carry away the day's dust and heat. Her movements are economical, skilled. She handles the food as if it were something precious and essential. You follow her quiet rhythm, assisting in gathering larger items, some baskets of greens that need cleansing, or perhaps sturdy bundles of bread dough waiting for its turn to rest. The work is slow, dictated by the natural cooling rate of the air and the needs of simple preservation. There is no sense of rush. Everything unfolds at a sustainable pace. The collective sounds are soft, the rhythmic scraping of stone against wood, the murmur of hushed instructions in the local tongue, the gentle slap of wet vegetables into woven baskets. These small noises weave together to form the audible soundtrack of a settled evening preparing for rest and sustenance. It is an organic soundscape that feels profoundly peaceful. As you stack these gathered provisions, the bundled greens, the firewood, the containers of tubers, a pervasive scent emerges, a blend of fresh straw, clean damp earth, and the distinct, sweet smell of wood smoke mixed with simmering liquid. This combination signals not merely dinner, but the completion of another day's cycle. The day's labor is gently folding itself into the sustenance of tomorrow. You notice the physical architecture adapting to this rhythm. Over time, the town has developed pockets designed specifically for these daily cycles. Small outdoor work areas near private dwellings, storage niches built low into retaining walls, and communal spots where preparation can happen without crowding the main thoroughfares. The entire layout reflects a deeply ingrained understanding of seasonal and diurnal rhythms. Taking your position near this central gathering point, you take a few moments simply to observe how the quality of light is changing again. It has lost its high energy and now possesses a deep, golden stillness, catching the dust motes dancing in the air above the working surfaces. The shadows are lengthening quickly, exaggerating the shapes of the barrels and the stacked bundles, anchoring the passing moment with visual weight. The act of preparing evening provisions is not just about feeding the body. It is a fundamental ritual of community continuance. It is an audible confirmation that the village remains organized, dependent upon itself, and deeply connected to the cycles of harvest and rest. You find yourself absorbing this sense of collective quietude, allowing the slow unfolding of tasks to settle into your own internal rhythm. This deep-seated routine washes over you, a gentle wave of historical continuity, reminding you how intertwined basic necessity is with cultural life. You help move the largest bundles of kindling toward a central hearth pit visible just beyond the group preparing the food. The wood smells dry and sweet under the fading light. You imagine the glow it will provide later, a steady, comforting presence that cuts through the growing cool darkness, transforming the simple dwelling into a space of shared warmth. The work slows as the sky deepens into shades of indigo above the distant rooftops. Everything seems to settle, from the slight dip in conversation volume to the slower pace of the water-rinsing vegetables. The focus remains on the textures, the rough weave of the empty baskets, the cool smoothness of the stone floor under your feet, and the dry crispness of the firewood ready for the flame. This careful preparation is an unconscious mirroring of deep human adaptability. You realize that every small, repetitive action, stacking wood, washing roots, gathering herbs, is a quiet act of resilience, preserving not just physical warmth, but cultural memory itself. As dusk finally settles around you, you feel yourself becoming part of this measured, calming flow, ready for the stories and deep rest that await. The golden light of late afternoon has softened into a bruised, deepening purple. You find yourself drawn toward the corner of the main square, where people are beginning to gather out of the immediate working rush. The day's necessary tasks feel distant now, receding like the tide from a beach. You settle down onto a stone ledge that catches the last faint warmth, near the shelter of an archway supporting some forgotten trade roof. A low murmur starts around you, not of commerce or urgency, but of gathering breath. You watch how the light shifts across the dusty cobblestones, lengthening the shadows until they almost seem solid enough to step into. The air holds a complex scent, the remnants of wood smoke mixed with the cooler, damp smell of settling earth and perhaps sweet river weeds drifting on a slight evening breeze. You settle in, becoming part of the quiet geography of the place. Around you, groups form organically. They do not sit in neat rows. They cluster by convenience, drawn toward the communal warmth that radiates from a small brazier or simply towards each other's presence. The conversation begins slowly, like embers glowing before finally catching. It is hushed, pitched low enough that if you stood up and walked away, you would lose the thread of it. This is not the clamor of market transactions. This is the intimate sound of sharing time. As people settle closer, more comfortable in the deepening twilight, some begin to tell stories. You are simply an observer for now, letting the low hum of voices wash over you, absorbing the cadence and the local inflection. One person speaks quietly about a legend associated with this very corner, a tale of old river spirits or perhaps merchants who failed to pass safely through here before the turning of the century. The story is not presented as fact, but as something passed down, whispered until it becomes part of the stone itself. You find your focus drawn to small details, the way a pair of worn leather boots shift against the rough stone, the subtle gleam on an old silver ring that catches the remaining light, the careful way someone gestures when describing a character from the story, a hand raised, then pulled back as if warning you away from a danger long past. The storytelling becomes less about the plot points and more about the feeling of memory, the weight of years carried in voices. The people are not telling grand epics meant for heroic audiences. Their stories are whispers drawn from the everyday pool of local knowledge. They speak of minor joys, a particularly good harvest, or a child who learned to climb the high curtain wall before winter settled in, interspersed with cautionary tales about bad weather, forgotten boundaries, and the importance of keeping traditions alive. Each story feels deeply rooted here, tied irrevocably to the stone beneath your feet and the specific life lived within these walls for centuries. You notice that even when they recount dramatic events from the past, there is a distinct understanding woven through their words. Change happens, lives pass, but the rhythm of waking, working, resting, and remembering remains stubbornly constant. The river's predictable curve continues. The sun still rises over these same rooftops. The stone retains its solid weight against time. The air grows cooler now, demanding a deeper settling into the moment. You feel the gentle shift in your own breathing, slowing down to match the rhythmic ebb and flow of the crowd's low chatter. Your awareness drifts from the specific words spoken, the names of faraway kings or mythical beasts, to the texture of the evening itself. The cool air beginning to prickle your exposed skin, the smell shifting again to include faint spices and banked cooking fires. Observing these gatherings is a study in continuity. You see men who were children when they first heard this tale, now sitting beside their grandchildren, telling it slightly differently, embellished by decades of living experience. The truth, it seems, lies not in the story itself, but in the act of remembering and retelling. It is an essential thread holding the community together. Sometimes a laughter will bubble up, a rich, sudden burst that immediately diffuses into more quiet murmurs. Sometimes there will be a pointed observation about someone else present, a gentle jab at a neighbor's questionable hat or slightly frayed cloak, delivered with years of familiar affection. These small moments are equally significant. They reveal the intricate web of personal history and shared reality that defines this temporary gathering. The deeper you listen, the more you realize that these stories are not merely entertainment. They are local records, a way of passing on moral guidelines, practical knowledge about farming patterns or river crossings, and simply defining who belonged here and what it meant to belong. To know the tales is to understand one's place within the vast, patient sweep of time. The conversation slowly shifts again, losing its epic scope. It moves toward more immediate concerns. Whose roof needs mending after the last rain, when the best time is to plant certain grains, or who has traveled to which neighboring village and what they brought back in news. These prosaic topics feel immensely weighty, grounding the community not in myth, but in shared, practical reality. You watch a young woman near your feet trace patterns in the dust of the cobblestone with her toe, perhaps repeating an old rhyme or counting something out loud. Her concentration is absolute, filtering the vast flow of surrounding voices into one small point of measured focus. This delicate gesture speaks volumes about the persistence of habit and the comforting nature of routine. The low light seems to gather in the wrinkles around people's eyes, illuminating stories untold, laughter shared, and quiet losses endured. You absorb this tapestry of lived experience, understanding that every utterance, every lingering gaze, contributes a thread to the grand, unwritten history of this place. The day's events have settled into background noise, replaced by the steady, reliable murmur of human community, a sound far more enduring than any single passing event. The sounds of the square have begun to soften now. The final, lingering echoes of the day's murmur are dissolving into a deeper quietude. You find yourself walking away from the central gathering point, drawn by an instinctive pull toward the relative stillness of open ground outside the main walls, where your lodgings abut the older, less traversed stone paths. You settle onto a low wall, or perhaps just stand at its edge, turning your face to look over the rooftops and past the immediate clamor. The air has cooled noticeably since the peak warmth of midday. It carries the combined scent of wood smoke from countless hearths extinguished now, mixed with the damp earth smell rising up after the heat. You let this mixture settle on you, a complex perfume unique to any sleeping town. The sounds that remain are not sudden noises, but rather ongoing rhythms. The low calling of perhaps a child who has wandered off, the gentle creak of an unsecured wooden shutter in the passing breeze, the soft splash of water somewhere distant. These minute soundscapes require you to become very still, listening with a patience usually reserved for observing stones. You lift your gaze upward, and the vastness hits you softly. The last traces of twilight are deepening into a profound, velvety blue that seems to absorb all light rather than reflect it. Above the immediate structures, the uneven gables, the terracotta roof tiles, the chimney stacks, the transition is dramatic and calming. It feels like looking up from inside the curve of something ancient. The stars, slowly emerging, are not the sharp points of modern brilliance. They feel older, softer. Each one seems anchored to a constellation that has remained largely unchanged for millennia. You tilt your head back, feeling the cool weight of the evening air against your skin. The quality of the darkness here is different from the artificial dark found within rooms, or even in an enclosed forest. It is a natural, breathable blackness. You trace the pattern of the celestial arc with your eyes, noting how constellations that seem familiar still carry a mythic distance, seeming far beyond any human life. It makes you think about time, a concept here that feels less like a linear measurement and more like a slow, continuous current, carrying all these moments into one another. Your mind begins to slow, mirroring the lessening activity of the town around you. The pressing need to categorize or plan for tomorrow softens into a gentle acceptance of the present stillness. You think about the rhythm of this place, the arduous cycle of waking up with the cold breath before dawn, the measured flow of commerce through the morning light, the deep settling exhaustion after a full day's activity. There is a profound sense of continuity here. The stones beneath your feet, worn smooth by untold generations of footsteps, those from market-goers and those of weary travelers, speak to this repetition. They have absorbed the tread of countless lives lived in similar rhythms. Rise, work, eat, rest. You feel yourself connected to that slow, deep pulse, a vibration you can almost sense through your bones. The reflections are not grand or dramatic. They are quiet observations about belonging and resilience. You consider how people live their lives here, not always with great fanfare or epic adventure, but through the careful maintenance of daily existence. The simple act of preparing bread in the morning, or sharing a few pieces of cheese at midday, becomes monumental under this enormous, indifferent sky. You shift your position slightly, adjusting against the uneven texture of the stone wall. A slight breeze moves through the nearby thicket of olive trees, rustling their leaves with a papery sound that drifts up and around you. It is a gentle sound, one that asks nothing of your attention but simply exists as part of the background symphony. You remember how today felt, the initial chill on the cobblestones, the smell of wet wood, the focused concentration watching the artisan's hands work steady patterns, the quiet hum of voices in the square. Each moment has been distinct, yet utterly contained within the larger river of time flowing through this town. As you watch a faint column of distant light flicker, perhaps a lantern being lit high up on a narrow side street, you realize how much energy is expended not in sudden action, but in sustaining a calm background presence. The commitment to simply continuing, day after day, season after season. This deep-seated determination feels monumental and strangely comforting. The weight of the past settles around you, palpable like the cool air itself. You feel the echoes of those who have slept on this very stone wall centuries before you arrived, their dreams, their anxieties, the quiet satisfaction of a meal eaten well. Your breathing deepens and evens out. The celestial display above seems to pull your gaze upward, drawing away any remaining petty concerns or rushed thoughts. There is nothing urgent in the vast sprawl of the night sky. There is only immense time passing, unhurried and inevitable. This makes the immediate moment, suspended between day's labor and night's deep peace, feel incredibly precious. You settle deeper into the cool stone, allowing the rhythmic wash of moonlight, a soft, silvery patina over the terracotta roofs, to guide your mind toward a deeply meditative state. The world contracts down to the feeling of the breeze against your skin and the slow sweep of the stars across velvet. The quietness becomes absolute, encompassing all the small sounds until they cease altogether. You are left suspended in time, enveloped by the ancient rhythm of the village falling into slumber under the indifferent watch of the cosmos. You find yourself back within the quiet embrace of your lodging, the deep indigo wash of night having settled over everything. The last lingering sounds from outside, a far-off dog bark, the gentle sighing of wind through a narrow chimney vent, seem to be wrapping around you like a damp blanket, signaling that the day's various rhythms are slowing down completely. You do not rush. There is no need for haste now that the cycle has reached its soft close. The air inside is cooler than it was earlier in the evening, carrying with it a medley of smells. Faint smoke from the communal hearth outside, the clean scent of damp stone walls, and the deep, earthy smell of wood storage. You move slowly across the packed earth floor towards your small cot. Your movements are guided by an ingrained sense of domestic ritual, a rhythm that has taken place countless times before you. The evening work requires folding the linen sheets used for the day, smoothing out the creases and memories left upon them. You notice how the heavy fabric resists your touch slightly at first, then smooths out to reveal its simple texture beneath the dirt and wear of travel. Lying clothes are laid over a sturdy wooden bench. You organize them by color or type, a small act of imposed order against the subtle messiness of life passing through this ancient place. This quiet activity brings with it an understanding of care, the necessary maintenance required to keep things functioning and beautiful for another dawn. You smooth out the edge of a simple tunic, feeling the rough weave of the wool under your fingers. It is durable, made to withstand many seasons and many washings, much like life itself here, which must simply endure. The stone walls surrounding you absorb the coolness of the night, keeping the interior steady against the chill that sometimes creeps in from the open courtyard. You pause by a small storage niche where the local provisions are kept, dried beans, tightly woven baskets, and jars with preserved goods. You check them over, making sure nothing has shifted or spoiled overnight. This small inspection is not just housekeeping. It is an acknowledgement of necessity, of sustained existence. Next, you attend to the fire pit. The embers from the communal hearth are still glowing, providing a soft, comforting orange light that pushes back against the approaching darkness in the corner. You gather the banked ash and sweep it into a small pile. Then, with careful hands, you arrange fresh kindling and smaller pieces of seasoned wood around the coals. You do not need to make the fire blaze fiercely. Only enough warmth to guard against the deep night's cold bite is required. The action is deliberate and methodical, linking directly back to the care shown earlier in the day. The careful gathering of firewood near the outer walls, the measured rhythm when stoking the coals. The sound of kindling placed upon hot ash is a soft hiss, a delicate whisper that seems both fragile and profound. As you add your small supply of wood, you feel the faint heat radiating outwards, warming the immediate space around you. This feeling of localized warmth is immensely precious now that the vast, cool indifference of night has arrived. You breathe in the sharp, complex smell, the mix of smoke, burning timber sap, and the ancient scent of dry stone absorbing moisture from the cooling air. You move back toward your sleeping area, crossing the threshold into a deeper state of quietude. The soundscape shifts dramatically now that you are further removed from the immediate sources of human activity. The murmuring gossip of the square has dissolved entirely. The clatter of dishes is gone. What remains are the deep, steady background sounds of a large community settling down to sleep. The muffled breaths, the occasional shift in weight on a straw mattress across the way, and the constant, low hush of the wind passing over the tiled roofs of the buildings that flank you. You take a moment simply to stand still within this small space, listening. Your attention focuses not on what is missing, the noise, the warmth of conversation, but on what remains, the underlying hum of continuity. The people have lived and breathed in these same walls for generations. Their routines are embedded into the very mortar and stone. This silence is not emptiness. It is a saturated quiet, rich with the history of countless sleep cycles before yours. Reflection naturally surfaces regarding the nature of time here. It does not seem to rush or accelerate during the day's activity. Rather, it expands and stretches out, taking on a monumental quality in the stillness of night. The passing hours are measured by light change, from the bright, functional gleam of midday sun to the deep, non-illuminating black of midnight, and you feel that profound weight of enduring time resting upon your shoulders. It is a kind of calm knowledge that this rhythm has sustained life here for millennia. You settle yourself onto your bedding, noticing how the woven straw mat holds the residual heat from your own body and the recently managed fire. The darkness is soft, not an aggressive void, but a gentle curtain drawn across the immediate world. You close your eyes slowly, letting your muscles relax entirely into the cot. Before sleep claims you, you consider the small details that make up this peaceful closing. The precise way the moon's faint glow illuminates the carved lintel above the door. The resilience of the roof tiles enduring another night's dampness. The simple comfort of the stone beneath your feet, having guided you safely through a full day. Each of these elements speaks to an unbreakable contract. The contract between people and their surrounding environment, built upon repetitive, measured care. The last sensation is the fading warmth from the corner where the fire burns low. It is a constant, gentle pulse against the inevitable chill. You become aware of your own breathing, slow and steady, matching the deepest rhythm of the slumbering town around you. The profound peace that comes at this point is not a reward after effort, but simply the necessary continuation of existence itself. A calm agreement with the earth